Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Root of the Matter, the oral connection to disease. I am your host, Dr. Rachaele Carver, and I'm very excited about our conversation today. I first learned about Dr. Adam on one of my colleagues' podcasts with Dr. Christine Schaffner, and he was talking all about his company, Immortal Wellness, all about frequency medicine, mental emotional connection to disease, which resonates very strongly with me. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know how valuable I find these kind of remedies that really uproot the actual cause of things right down at that cellular level. I think science quantum physics is really proving to us these days that there's not this lock and key receptor fit anymore, that so much more of it is energy through these vibrations, these frequencies, light. So, Dr. Adam, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking your time. He's all the way from South Africa, so I appreciate you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to develop Immortal Wellness?
Okay, so I was a homeopathic doctor for about 20 years in South Africa, primarily, a bit in France, a bit in India, a bit in Australia. But after about 20 years, I got to a point where I'd seen enough patients. So I kind of got to patient fatigue, and I just decided that it was around the time my daughter was born. So I want to have more time to focus on her and not sort of spend all the time with my patients. So I moved into a more research aspect, a developmental research aspect, in terms of like working on, what is disease? Like, is there a set of remedies we can come up with which can deal with the causes of disease and aging as well? I mean, a big focus on aging because obviously that's a big cause of disease. That was a lot of my work with the immortal jellyfish. But, my attempt was really to create a system of medicine which people were able to use for themselves to act as like an aid on their journey through understanding to a point where they could actually take on some level of control over their states. Because I mean, we all know that feeling of being out of control and not knowing what's going on, something weird happening in your body, and it's terrifying. And often we run to a physician and then he'll give us some extreme sort of intervention, and then we're kind of stuck in that, and then we dare not leave it. And like, so I wanted to get to the point where people took more control over their physical symptoms, so that they'd be less vulnerable, I guess, or more informed, or more aware of what actually goes on in here. I mean, as much as we can say that, I mean, it's a big claim to even make in the first place. But if we don't take a stab at it, we're never going to get there. So this was this whole system of medicine is my attempt at sort of taking a stab at the backstory behind disease. And I mean, not the traditional nutritional stuff, the exercise. We all know that. I mean, there's new stuff coming out all the time. There's, all these genetic research stuff. There's peptides. There's all these things. But, I took a completely different view on it. I thought, well, what is it? What area has really not been dealt with very well, except possibly by psychology, or you could argue psychiatry, but I would doubt that. But what a lot of my medicines focus on are the idea of, I come from I studied homeopathy and naturopathy. So when I was studying naturopathy, they came up with this weed seed feed concept. So you weed out all the bad guys. I mean, they're often talking about the gut there. They'll weed out all the bad bacteria, then they'll seed it with the good bacteria, and then they'll feed it. They'll optimize the conditions whereby healthy growth and biosis can occur. And this is really kind of how I structured my system. So like a lot of the weeding was not physical, but it was like mental and emotional. I had remedies which would actually dig down into our history and, back through our ancestry, habitual patterns, acquired trauma, a lot of these states which are considered to be generally off limits. People might come to them through yoga or breath work or meditation, but there's no actual system that goes in there and says, look, we want to deal with all those broken ex-girlfriend breakups that were so traumatic, and now you're just repeating the pattern. Like, what do we have for that? So I mean, that was really the first remedy I came up with, was a substance called liberation. And it was designed to basically finish off whatever we hadn't finished. So think of it like you have a relationship, like an arrow, it breaks off, and then the arrow breaks off, and then we've got this arrow stuck in us, and we're always wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed with this person, or I'd gone overseas, or done whatever it was. And this is energy, this is mind space that is frozen. Now, where it's frozen, I mean, the body for me is the memory. So it's stored somewhere. in the body. But until we can liberate that and move forward from that, we're always doomed to, repeat these patterns because we haven't resolved it. And people think of karma as like what happened, but the truth is, a lot of karma is about what didn't happen and the what could have or what might have happened. But until we can see these events play out, we can't ever truly let them go. It's like the best example I have of this was, it was actually the third day after I took the liberation. I made it. I'll go into ingredients in a little bit. But, so in the dream, I had a very bad breakup, intense, and we'd split up, never seen each other again. And I'd completely forgotten about her. 12 years on, I've got a beautiful daughter with someone else, everything's fine. But in the dream, she's 9 months pregnant. I'm with her, and I realized what it would have felt like had this happened. And I felt something just leave my body. And I realized that somewhere in my body, I was carrying this broken story. And I just needed to finish the story so that it could drop away. And as it left me, I felt something like leave my body. It was like, wow, all this stuff has been stored like in escrow, but frozen escrow that we can't touch. And how can we ever really talk about health or total wellness until we've dealt with this mental emotional residue or backlog of everything? I mean, when I took this remedy, I took it over like 9 months. It went through my old girlfriends, broken friendships, family, acquaintances, and each time it would, like, either in dreams or in real life, sometimes I'd run into these people in supermarkets, or they'd phone me, or but each time I would get to the point like, okay, bring them in, like, have a look. Do I want to bring this closer? Do I want to let it go? Or do I want to have a new interaction? But it felt like I'd literally combed through all my old memories in order to bring me to a point where I was clear with it. And I just, as I took it, it felt like the weight of a lot of this just kept lifting. And, when I started this company, there was I was a single parent. So I was like looking after my daughter by myself, and like patience, and it was a lot, so I was quite overloaded. But as I started taking this, I felt my energy returning, because a lot of this backpack full of memory that ironically I wasn't even aware existed there. We think of like, okay, I've dealt with it in my mind, I've dealt with it, but have we dealt with it emotionally, and have we dealt with it, more importantly, somatically, physically? Has the body felt like, okay, I've had closure with this person, I can actually physically let go? It's like the dog will remember the trauma until it goes through it again and then moves forward. And we're very similar. We've got these residues of memory, and until we're able to move forward from this, we can't ever really, for me, we can't ever talk about real healing. Then a lot of the stuff we do will benefit, but if we're ignoring this massive area, which, let's call the past, for want of a better word, it's very difficult to move forward out of this. So this is really what I focused on. In the weeding part of it, like finding remedies, making remedies, which would actually go into these scenarios, whether it's people or events or emotion, and sort of pull them out, and then allow us to have different outcomes. I mean, the other one in this category, there's two really in this category of this intensive weeding category. Well, three, but like the mental emotional ones. There's another remedy called closure, which does a similar thing, but it does it with the emotions, the residues of the emotions. So I know this is quite hard to sort of comprehend as a concept, but let me just tell you a story, because I mean that shows how this works. So I make this closure. It's made from 3 Peruvian plants and gold and a whole lot of stuff. But anyway, well, I can go into the details if you're interested. But what it does is, the idea is you go back to the memory, and then you feel the emotion, and then you almost go out a different door. And in the process, you resolve it, you move forward out of this. So in the dream, okay, so in the dream, I'm back at school. I mean, now I'm 57. This was like when I was 16 or something. So I'm back at school, boys school, boys private school, Methodist, quite conservative, a lot of aggression, only boys. So in the dream, I'm there, I'm sitting there, and I'm late. So I missed assembly and I'm late, and I look down, I'm not wearing my school uniform. Instead of a gray pants, I've got brown pants on. Instead of like a white shirt and tie, I've got a pink top on. So I'm going to get I'm going to get into a lot of trouble from everyone, and I'm going to be like ridiculed. So the feeling of dread, it was like, I'm just drenched in dread, like, oh, you're late and everyone knows it, and like you're doing something wrong. And so the self-consciousness dread is there. So I went to find my teacher, and he said, well, go upstairs. So I go upstairs, and instead of classrooms, there's this beautiful garden, there's a wedding going on, there's children playing. And in that moment, the dread transforms into this feeling of relief, the feeling that there is safety in this environment, that I can actually go into this environment and I can be nourished by it. It's not a place of dread. And then I wake up and the feeling, I just feel the dread leave my body. Now, I wasn't even aware I was carrying dread from when I was like 13 to 16 or 17, but somewhere in the body it was obviously there because this is what the dream chose to focus on. And, I realized that, every interaction I'd had after that, going to university and then on from there was to some extent stained by this feeling of dread. So that would leave me feeling slightly reticent going into a social situation because maybe there's something might happen. So there was such a level of anxiety. So I reeled back and I don't engage as much as I could. And then when I got rid of that, it's like, wow, okay, I've been carrying this, and this has been subtly like a stain over my experience ever since. I mean, I've gone a long way to like outlive that or move beyond it. But I realized, well, people think of the initial thing, the actual event, but like how that event actually shapes your future going forward. And I was actually kind of appalled that I'd only discovered this now, that it taken me so long to kind of discover this, because when we look at like what we learned from our parents and what happens to us at school and environment and traumatic relationships and travel, we are the product of all these memories kind of stitched together, and then we present into the world, and then we try to make sense of it. But we make sense of it in the sense of the experience justifies the way we interact and the way we react in the world. And I was actually I was aghast. I was appalled at this. Like, wow, this massive piece of information that was kind of governing my behavior. Let me tell you another story, because I mean, I'm very passionate about these two remedies because of this, because nothing really touches these areas. But if we don't deal with this stuff, our whole life is to some extent stained by it. So the second one, I had a very good friend and we spent a lot of time studying Buddhism together and we were very close, and he betrayed me very badly. So the feeling was like love and hate, all bound up together. Like, what do I do with this person who was like a brother to me, but then betrayed me very badly? So, I realized what I'd done is I just buried it in the ground. Like I'd wrapped it in concrete and I'd buried it in the ground, because what do we do with stuff if we embrace the love, we betray the hate. If we embrace the hate, we betray the love. So we don't know what to do with it. So we just put it on hold and we push it away and we leave. It's like, oh, it's too hard. So, but in the dream, we're friends again. So I wake up and the body is saying to me, we're friends again. And so like, okay, so it feels like we're friends again. So based on that, all the memories start coming back. And then like, oh, but what do I do with these negative emotions? It's like, okay, so let me bury them. I remember like digging a hole, putting these emotions in the ground and taking back the beautiful memories. And then I, next day, third day, I have another dream, and I come to this, in the dream, I'm at this manhole, and this manhole is his face, right? But it's been covered in concrete. So the message is like, okay, don't go there. But to be sure, I just hammer through the concrete to get down to this passage. So I get down to this underground road through this tunnel. But instead of a road, it's just rubble. It's just bits of rock sitting there. So like the road back to the memory is gone. Even if I'd wanted to go back to that memory, it's gone. And then I feel into myself, can I feel the resentment? And it's like I'm looking at someone else's memory. I can take a picture, but I can't get the emotion. It's gone. So the beauty of that remedy closure is that it opens the door. It makes you kind of go through it. It takes you out another way where there is resolution, but then it not just closes the door, it just destroys the door. So we can't even go back there to dwell on it. That such technology even exists is quite amazing. I mean, if people who are genuinely concerned about health, to not look in this area is, I mean, it's just, you can't not, you have to, because we never know what's going to, trip us up. I mean, you mentioned like with your daughter and the eczema that came up. I mean, who knows where that even came from? But, somewhere in the story, there was a reason for this all to happen. And often if we can understand it, or we can make peace with the past, I mean, really make peace with the past, not, I mean, everyone says like make peace with the past. But I mean, these are just words, but if we can feel it in our heart, and more importantly, I would say even feel it in our body, then we can actually move on. And then the body's like, okay, I've made peace with it. I can move on. And then it's not bringing us back to this scenario to play it out again and again, to play it out. And this is what we see in so many relationships. The person will manifest another person who's very similar to the previous one because they haven't played out the pattern, and that might have been their parents' interaction. And I'm just like, enough. It's like, let's move beyond that. Let's be free. Let's be free from the past so we can at least be present. I mean, there's enough going on in the world at the moment anyway, without having to deal with like the kind of crazy stories of the past. And yes, maybe we were born here in order to experience this, but I think we're also born here to free ourselves from it so we can actually have a different outcome. And this is why I'm very excited about this technology. But I'm going off on that, but I've got a great tooth story for you as well. I mean, about a miracle tooth, if you want me to tell you that one.
I mean, it's just amazing, and what I found, in the last decade of working with patients, doing some of my health coaching, is I see these patients with these chronic issues, right? It's like I mean, they've got a laundry list of labels, right? Of all these diagnoses. I prefer to call just labels, right? And those people, these are the people that have these stuck emotional patterns. So you can do all the supplements and I mean, this was part of my story. I did all the things, changed my diet, took these supplements, did these tests, met with a million different, type of specialists. But it was that mental emotional piece that was the clearing and that was the path to my curing the eczema. I mean, my hands are beautiful now. Like I don't struggle with that. And I have that thought in my head, I will never have eczema again. I'm like, and just again, that thought in itself is incredibly powerful, right? And so, I have my older daughter, she's about to be a senior in high school and she's, worried about college. And she just kept saying, I'm not going to get into college. And I keep trying to break that pattern of thinking because I'm like, the more you think that, the more that's going to become true,
Right.
And so this is so so important, and I love the whole concept of homeopathy and frequency. Again, we don't have to worry, about side effects and things like this. This is our body naturally recognizes frequencies, right? This is how our cells honestly like to communicate. And we can never reach that goal. And again, there's never necessarily an end to our health, right? We're constantly
No.
evolving. We live in a challenging world and lots of toxins and lots of emotional baggage too. But helping the body remove these things is absolutely vital to long-term, well-being. So I'm super excited. I've been doing have this eye thing, one of my right eye, which I've spent so much time and money trying to figure out, what's going on. So I was like, oh, you had immortal eyes. I'm like, I am diving into that, see if we can get to the bottom of that. And I've been doing the golden spiral.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit about that golden spiral one.
Okay, so just a bit of backstory. Like, okay, so basically what I do is I program water. That's what I do. I start with distilled water. So it's this empty medium or hungry medium. They think of distilled water as hungry water that wants to grab whatever it can. So it's had the minerals taken out. So basically it's a sponge. So with the golden spiral, it was, I mean, I don't know how much people know about homeopathy, but the way it was made was light was passed through a sculpture of the golden spiral. So, of the ratio, but it was a sculpture built on the spiral. And then the light went through the sculpture, basically imprinting a shadow onto the water. And then that water was taken and potentized, which is running up through the homeopathic process. And then I took it and I made it stronger. But the idea behind that was, we're all built on this golden spiral. So if we can bring that back to people, if people can ingest it, just to remind themselves that, like, yes, I'm on this perfect ratio, and that is me. I think, a lot of deviation from the norm is a result of people drifting out of that, and some of that is mental, emotional. But once again, this would be in the seed category that I was talking about. If you're seeding this memory of this perfect ratio, which we're all built on. I mean, the hand is built on it, the womb is built on this, the ear is built on it, sunflowers, seashells, galaxies. I mean, it just goes on and on. Wherever you look, you'll see this ratio. And like, who put it there in the first place, or why it is like the way it is? I mean, that's not the business for this discussion. But if we can ingest it, if we can take it as a frequency and return ourselves to a more balanced version. When I took it, I found standing up straighter was easier. And a lot of people said that, like, it felt like the left and the right side of their face balanced out more. I mean, I know, in certain trials, when people look at people on the golden ratio, the more closely the person is to the golden ratio, the more appealing we find that. And that's the same with architecture, natural structures. The closer it is to this golden ratio, the more closely we can identify with this as being something we like or something desirable. So, when we're taking this golden spiral, we're just saying to the body, return to this original format. And it's just sort of bathing the cells in the memory that this is our inheritance. This is the format we were born within. And I think trauma definitely, obviously toxins, all the bad stuff would cause deviation from that, because it would cause distortion, because we're not, say, in alignment, or the cells forget their nature. I mean, this is obviously what happens with cancer cells, but the cells forget what they were and they deviate from that, and as a result, disease creeps in. So what a lot of people talked about taking the golden ratio was a feeling like that they were more aligned, that everything was in alignment, in the correct ratio, whether it's the body parts in relation to themselves or just them in relation to themselves, like how aligned they felt with the world. Yeah, so that's the golden spiral in a nutshell. That's the purpose of it. And when we ingest it, we basically set off this like kind of micro pulse into the body, which
Yeah.
reminds us of this. Yeah.
Yeah, remember. Now tell us, the name of the company is Immortal Wellness. So tell us about this immortal jellyfish. It's kind of an interesting story.
Okay. So there's two versions. I mean, I've got two versions of the jellyfish. The first one was, okay, so there's this creature, the immortal jellyfish, Turritopsis dohrnii. It's a tiny creature. It's like the size of your pinky. It literally floats around in the ocean, and it has the ability, when injured or getting old, to revert back to its original form. So generally, what will happen? It'll float through the ocean. It'll cut itself on a rock. It'll drop down to the bottom of the ocean, turn back into undifferentiated stem cells, and then basically bloom again. I mean, the image of like a rose basically dissolving into mush and then turning into a new rose is kind of what happens. I mean, it has, you know, DNA that switches on enzymes to like dissolve it, and then enzymes to switch it on to recreate it. Now, I mean, we've got bones and children and cars, and it's not going to work for us to be able to dissolve our structure, our physical proteins and our structure. But what I was able to capture from this immortal jellyfish was the message of regeneration, the message of return to an earlier version of yourself. So this is the idea behind this, and we see this with the immortal eyes, quite clearly, because it's, with a lot of people have floaters, and the vitreous humor just becomes more sticky over time, and they get these dark blobs. I don't have these, but one of the most noticeable things with the immortal jellyfish and the eye drops was people were using them to actually turn these dark blobs back into normal, soft, like luscious, juicy jelly, as opposed to this clumpy, old sticky stuff. So it was basically saying to the cells, I mean, wherever you apply it to the cells, to return to an earlier, healthier version of yourself. We're able to see this with the eyes, because it's obviously it's quite a dynamic substance, this vitreous humor, as opposed to like bones. But people were, I mean, my knees were a complete mess when I started using this immortal jellyfish, and now they're almost perfect. It's basically, it rebuilt them, it returned them to an earlier, healthier version of themselves. I get like weird spots on my skin, I put a bit on there, and it returns those cells to an earlier, healthier version. So what I've been able to do is I've been able to capture this frequency from the immortal jellyfish, but then I went further, because I wanted to isolate the protein. I was able to find the protein and build the protein out of rice proteins, and so we could use it topically, so we could isolate it. And this is one of the ingredients in the miracle tooth that I used. So I use it for the mouth. I mean, this is where it was an interesting story, like dovetailing with your stuff is, I went to the dentist, and he was like, "Oh, you need a root canal," and that voice of doom, "Oh, you need a root canal." It's like, and then of course he's pouring in my mouth, and he goes on to give me a lecture on the nature of the tooth and the nerve, and how, like, okay, because there's been some work on the tooth, and the nerve is getting squeezed, and the nerve is dying, and as a result of the dying nerve, I'm going to have to root canal. And then I think, well, hang on, part of this jellyfish action is to improve blood flow to areas. I remember when I first took it, I was wandering around in the middle of the night in winter, and I wasn't even feeling the cold, So it was like, okay, so if we could improve my blood flow systemically, what if we try it topically? And this is what I made up. I played with different concentrations, and I found that it sorted out my root canal. I never had to have the root canal. It was fantastic. I sprayed it on for like 3 weeks. This is not a saying it'll definitely work on all teeth, but it got rid of it. I never had to have the root canal. And the tooth got a bit tweaky about a month back, and I did the same thing and it disappeared. So, and this was over 2-3 years ago. The idea there is if we can improve the blood supply to the nerve, then the nerve doesn't have to die. But when I was playing with this protein, I discovered that at certain concentrations, what it did is it stopped the bacteria from turning the sugars into plaque. So, you would spray it on and then swish it around your mouth, and it would feel like, oh, wow, I've had like a tooth cleaning. It's like it doesn't feel like there is plaque on the mouth. And as you know, I mean, obviously, tartar is the main cause of tooth problems. So if we can get to the point where the bacteria are not turning the sugars into plaque, then obviously we go a long way to sort of help the mouth. I mean, of course, it keeps the mouth healthy as well, and improves the blood supply, which obviously keeps the nerves healthy. But I've spoken to various dentists, and tartar is the big one. That's the thing that and often we don't even notice it. But this is why Miracle Tooth has been so popular, because there's nothing else like this as a preventative, so we don't have to go down the whole like, oh no, I have to chop open this tooth because there's too much decay. So it's been very big here, also in the States, but it's just a different approach to tooth care. So I mean, the biggest find was that at a certain concentration, it actually stopped the bacteria from proliferating. That was the biggest surprise. I mean, I wasn't expecting that to happen, and then it was like, oh wow, it feels like my teeth are smooth as if I've just had a tooth cleaning, but I haven't. It's like, okay, well the plaque's not proliferating, so that's very exciting. But the other versions, the Immortal Jellyfish, I've used it in many different formats. There's a skin version. People can spray it into their creams and apply it to their skin to like keep the skin as healthy as possible. Obviously, the eye drops because we want to keep the eye as healthy as possible. But the reason I came to the Immortal Jellyfish in the first place was because I realized that even with the best of everything, the very act of aging will cause us to get sicker because the body gets less strong. But what if we could push this off for longer? If we could keep reminding the body that we had younger cells and the younger cells were more capable, then a lot of the issues around aging, I mean, I've looked at aging quite extensively, and it's quite a thing because there's all these memes as well, like you're getting on there, you're not so young anymore, or like, what are you doing? I mean, people imply you're going to retire at some point, and then you got to start thinking like that, which means like, oh, you got to expect to start dying. And this whole thing came from my daughter when she was like 4, and she came to me in the playground, and she was crying, and I was like, what happened, Bubs? And she said to me, you're gonna die and I'm gonna die. And I was like, hang on, wait, I might have found a way around this, This is when I was starting to play with the model jellyfish. So I'll do my best to make sure that we don't have to go down this route, because the thought of leaving her alone in the world was just too terrifying. So that was a strong, goad to me to to work with this. But I realized the physical aspect of regeneration and longevity was just one component. They're equally valid and powerful other components that are just not really being addressed. I mentioned the memes for one. This idea that we're going to get old, we're going to die. Everyone's saying, "Oh, you're not so young anymore," or "We're not so young anymore." Like they're almost making it okay for us to get old and die. And I was like, no, please don't bring this stuff into my world. That's your world, and like in your world, you might get old and die, but I'm running the world where I don't get old and die. So. But then I realized like these mental emotional things, which unless they're resolved, whether it's memories or emotions or broken friendships, unless these things are resolved, they are weight, which is going to slow down the cells, which is going to cause us to age as well. So, the whole, it's a whole program, but a lot of the new technology now around longevity and aging, I mean, is getting pretty good. But when I look at it, it's like there are two things that they really don't cover very well. One is sleep. because obviously if you have good sleep, then obviously you're healthier. And the other one is the fact that we are not just physical beings. They say anger damages the liver more than alcohol, for example. That if we have these things that we're not resolved with, or we're not at peace with the world, this is going to cause the body to age and get sick and die. So this is why that's been such a strong focus of the work. The immortality was a huge piece. I mean, I wouldn't not acknowledge that. And even if we can slow it down and then work on the mental emotional components, so we can actually deal with that, and so we go into the world present and aware and at peace every day, not carrying the weight of the past. Or often it's not even our stuff; it's society stuff, or our parents' stuff, or the culture stuff, or some weird trauma from youth. I mean, it's when we look at that, my mission was like, okay, let's just give people a fair shake. Let's just give them a chance. Let's not put like an iron around their leg and like, God, they got to lug the cement along with them their whole life. Let's just give them a clear shake so they can actually do what they really need to do. And yes, one does have to address the past, because without that, it will stop the cells from proliferating. It'll cause us to age and die eventually. I mean, I'm not immortal yet, but I mean, it's hard to say, but I'm doing my best to look at this as you would look at a problem. Like, okay, well, this is what are the components in this problem that need addressing? And I'm trying to bring in something for each area that needs addressing. And this is where I'm working at the moment with Immortal Wellness.
It's amazing, and when I've heard that podcast and heard there was one for teeth, I was so excited because, as I was telling you earlier, my whole goal is to never pick up a drill again, right? We'll educated everybody. Everybody will be healthy enough that we will never have, tooth problems, and always trying to avoid that more invasive dental work. Now we have a new microscope in the office, and where we clinically would, thought, yeah, they're patient, they're pretty good. We'll see them every 6 months. We take a microscope slide and wow, seeing all sorts of spirochetes and, these gliding rods and all these things that we never, again, clinically doesn't look too bad. Yeah, maybe there's a little bleeding here, but we attribute it to scraping them with a sharp instrument. But then when we see that on the slide, we're like, wow. And I mean, there's just so much clear evidence, right, that oral bacteria is implicated in, heart disease, brain disease, preterm births, cancer, you name it. I do think, infections and toxins are the root of most, physical chronic ailments. So, and the cool thing about my job is the mouth is so accessible. I think I say this every day, right? It's a lot easier to clean the mouth than roto-root the arteries. So this makes me really excited that I'm adding this to my armamentarium, after one of those deep cleanings with our laser and our ozone. And this is something to take on. I'm always trying to look for or figure out a way that somebody can do this at home, right? They could come in every day and get an ozone shot because that's amazing for giving energy and good blood flow, but that's not realistic, right? Somebody's not going to come in and pay every single day for ozone. So the idea of this miracle tooth where every single day you're getting that frequency of regeneration, of good blood flow, that's just incredibly exciting. And this isn't, a $200 product. So it's super affordable. It's super easy to, add in, forget the mouthwash, brush floss, some miracle tooth, and I think we're going to be able to prevent a lot of chronic disease. So this is what makes me, really excited about this product and really trying to push the knowledge of these kind of, healing tools that we all need to know about these things, right? And so it's important, especially if you're dealing with something chronic, like let's uproot. We talk about there's all sorts of techniques, right? There's EFT, there's, emotion code, body code, and these kind of stuff. But this, we're actually putting that frequency into the bodies where the cells can, feel it, see it, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it becomes even more powerful. It makes me think, my daughter, oh, she just had a bad breakup. I'm like, okay, let's get some liberation and closure right into her body there, right?
It's been amazing for people with breakups, and like they're like going, and it's like, oh, okay, they just let go of it, and they're like on, as opposed to like the week or two or three they're going to dwell on it. It's like, why do we have to do that for a week or two or three?
Yeah.
It seems unnecessary. It seems excessive, and like, my motto is like, why suffer? And the younger we can sort of introduce these
Mhm.
to the kids, like, if they can, start using the miracle tooth when they're younger, then a lot of the stuff around the infections that might occur, or the bacteria that might actually start to breed there, or the tartar that might form, that they won't even have to do that. I mean, most commercial mouthwashes are just, whoa, alcohol and sugar. It's like, wow, how does that work? I look at that, it's like, sure, what was the person thinking when they thought of that? Like, delicate mucosa, let's put some terrible things in there and let's wash your mouth out with that. So,
And it's
yeah.
like the whole idea, but that weed seed feed thing, we're learning now, right, that probiotics, maybe they don't work so well, right? They're transient, only kind of work when you're taking them, but they don't have long-lasting effects,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Whereas
mm,
something
mm,
like this kind of stuff, this is a frequency. This is changing the
mm,
terrain, right? That's what I talk
mm,
about a lot in my practice on the podcast is it's the environment in the body that's either going to breed health or disease.
mm,
So we want to increase the frequency of health
mm,
and vitality. The more, voltage and energy we have in our system, our immune system will naturally take over. And, even though we encounter, hundreds of microbes and toxins on a daily basis, if we
mm,
have the proper energy, the voltage in our body, we're not even going to know that we encountered those bugs because the immune system, right, has that energy.
mm.
Have you ever done any research or seen, like, is there any impact on the mitochondria using these frequencies?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's kind of clinical stuff. I mean, experiential. People with the immortal range. A lot of the walkers became runners, runners became trail runners became kite surfers, kite surfers. I don't know what they did, but like everyone leveled up. And I remember like one time I was just walking up this hill, and there was absolutely no sense of struggle, exhaustion, or out of breath. And it was like I was just powering up the hill as if I like had a motor in me. And it's like, wow, this is what it's like to be young, where you don't actually feel that weight of age. And it's like, well, why? And you forget about it completely because as you grow up, it's like you get used to like taking a bit of time to move in certain directions. But that is our inheritance. If we can actually bring back that memory, I've got one called the Immortal Youth, which I use some of the Norse runes to basically bring the Jing back, the life force, Jing from Chinese medicine. So, and we notice this in like increased, nail growth, increased hair growth, not so much for men, but like my nails, I have to trim these guys twice a week because they just grow so fast. So, I mean, if the cells are proliferating more quickly, it means that they're stronger. They have the greater resistance to environmental stressors. So, you know, there's many ways to really look at all of this. And what I've tried to do with this is what I wanted to mention with the seeding is like I'm not necessarily talking about probiotics. What I was talking about was, I mean, I've got another remedy called creation. So it came to my attention that I wanted to create this best day ever. That was my mandate to myself. Like, okay, what does my best day ever look like? Okay, I want to be inspired. I want to be creative. I want to be playful. I want to be engaged. And I want to just enjoy myself. Like, so what does that look like? So I use different remedies, different components, like the light of Jupiter and, orchids and a whole range of different unusual bee pollen and royal jelly and like basically each of them to demonstrate or to elicit these kind of feelings in one, so that the idea was like if you could take it and you would feel optimistic and enthusiastic and playful, that would be your like instead of coffee for the day, you go out feeling like optimistic and like upbeat. And then people would smile at you because you were smiling as opposed to like frown at you because you were frowning. And then from that you'd have a good interaction that would spin on to the next interaction. So this idea of like repatterning the way we operate in the world by just seeding positive frequencies around how we interact, as opposed to, people kind of take it for granted that we have to be a certain way. We must be faithful to our mood. I wake up in a bad mood, I must stay in this bad mood. But what if we could just change it? It's like, okay, well, let's instill a good mood in myself. Let's like bring in the mood of abundance or creation or playfulness. Then your day gets turned into just that. So this is more what I'm talking about with seeding. I agree with you. The probiotics thing is like, it's kind of was all the rage, and it's, yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, ultimately, but happier people, and I think studies have been done on this, happier people are generally healthier. I mean, this is just, there's no doubt about this because, your immune system's stronger and you're less likely to take a negative view on things. Or if something bad does happen, you're more likely to just blow it off. It's like, oh, whatever, and then move on, as opposed to going down a downward spiral, which a lot of people do. Like one bad thing happens, something else bad happens, and then they're like, oh, I'm doomed, nothing good happens to me. They go on this downward spiral. Like you talk about your daughter, like, oh, I can't get into college and like that. You want to stop these things, but if you're able to change this, and I've seen this with kids as well, like giving kids who are a little bit anxious and neurotic and like feel trepidation on going to school, you give them creation. And all of a sudden, it's like they feel more outwards. And then all of a sudden, they have more friends because they're more friendly and they're more outward. And then their experience on the day to day level is more pleasant. So they enjoy themselves more. And then, you know, good things generally happen to happy people because people almost want to help them because it feels good to be near that happiness. So if you're bringing that out, people will automatically gravitate towards you to benefit you. So this is more what I was talking about with the seeding concept, seeding good ideas. We have another one, we have another range of the Immortal range, clearing. And there's one with with Vishnu in. And this similar thing of like, oh, let's bring mantra in, let's bring these archetypal frequencies of creation, abundance, clearing in, just to almost walk ourselves through it. Like we model ourselves on it, like internally we take it and then we feel that way. And if we feel like everything's going to go our way, it probably will, because most people don't feel it's going to go their way, and therefore mind is the self-fulfilling gem, and it fulfills that, and then things don't go your way, and then you're like, oh, I told you it wasn't going to go my way, and then it's downward spiral. So what I'm proposing here is more like an upward spiral. Let's set the thing spiraling upwards so that we actually use this charge of the mind's going to do what the mind's going to do anyway. But if you put a little cherry spin on it and it goes up, then you're going to have a good day as opposed to going down. And we are creatures of habit, and if we do something for like a couple weeks, that becomes the archetype. I notice with this creation, I take it for like a month and then I wouldn't notice it as much. And then I would stop taking it for 2-3 months. It's like, okay, things aren't as friendly as they were. And I'll start taking it again. All of a sudden, things start opening up again. So we are creatures of habit, and life is dynamic. And we have to be aware that stuff is moving between things. And we do have our own, karma or history, or there's too many factors to even consider. What I'm proposing here is like we just load the pot so much in our own favor that whatever happens, we have the best potential outcome within that. So even if we do have like, like you were saying with your daughter with heartbreak, like, okay, she's broken up, but like 2 days is fine. She can cry in her room for 2 days, but it doesn't have to be 3 weeks. No, like why? It's like you get the lesson of like, this isn't so nice. Like, what did I do wrong? Or maybe it was my fault, or it doesn't matter what the lesson, we all have to go through this. But, if people are in these spaces for extended periods of time, it risks like secondary infections. It's like as a result of that, negative self thoughts creep in, and then opportunistic stuff comes in, dumps on top of that. I mean, we see this with disease, like a cough turns into a bad flu, and then a chest infection, and then it's like bronchitis, and then it all goes south. But if we're able to intervene quickly and move it into a positive space, so this is my vision of like an upward spiral, and pretty positive, almost playful interactions with medicine, as opposed to sort of taking it so seriously, because we're prone to take it seriously. But even this constriction around taking it so seriously is like, oh, I'm gonna get this, that's making us sicker. So if we can head that stuff off and like move in a different direction with this, then we can dance with it as opposed to being dragged behind the car by it. So that's really my message with this, and because that's the way I like to deal with disease in myself. Something comes up, it's like, okay, what is this? What's the learning? How can I get out of this as quickly as possible? Don't fall prey to, you must go do this or do that, or like this intervention and all other people's fear. Like, let's cut that out firstly. Let's find my own way through it.
Mm.
And often just a good attitude will spin you into something else. I mean, yes, there is learning, and certain people do have heavier karmas, for want of a better word, than other people. But even within that, if we can load it in our favor, then it makes the journey more of a dance and a journey than a struggle. Because I don't believe we were brought here to struggle, and that just seems stupid. I mean, like, why would we do that? I mean, think of a benevolent creator, like, why would he put you in torment? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, yes, we're here to express whatever we feel is important, and resonates with our heart. And a lot of the stuff that stops us from doing that is history, is narrative, is casual disease. But yes, maybe we need to taste it for a day or two, but then we can move on and we can get the lesson. We're not stupid here. We can understand it as like, okay, I see that. I see how this kind of thinking will lead me to bad spaces. So I'll choose to get myself out of it with whatever, and I'll engage the upward spiral, and then I'll do what I actually meant to be doing here on this planet. I mean, we've taken a bit of a philosophical bent here, but I think the nature of this is quite, the nature of health and disease. I think we realize as doctors that it's not a straight line. It's not obvious. It's more like something gossamer that we touch quite gently, as opposed to that we grab and we move around like that. I think a lot of the problems come when we treat it quite brutally, and we treat the body as this like machine that's somehow in error, and we just got to put something in there, and it's like, no, you might touch it gently and then it might move in a different direction. So you almost play with it like you hold a baby. So anyway, I digress, but yeah.
Well, if you're that kind of person who's saying, "I've tried everything," or "I feel like I'm doing everything right, yet I'm still experience, XYZ," this is the rabbit hole that we need to go down. This is what we need to explore. So now, after I first heard your episode with Christine, I went on the website. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I want everything." So you do consultations. So, and I had the wonderful privilege of speaking with Diana already, the co-founder. She does a wonderful blog too on the website. And so she does free consultations, and she'll talk to you, here's what I'm experiencing right now. And she will give you the things to start with. Because again, if you go onto the website, you could probably resonate with just about every single remedy that's on there, right? Because at one time we're like, if you've been on this planet for a decade or more, you've experienced all these different things, right? So, it got me really excited. And Diana was telling like, okay, I ordered a bunch of things just to try it first. And then when I spoke with her, she said, well, maybe try this one first and that one. So that was nice guidance, because I know sometimes with these things, if you're like me and you get excited, you just want to try everything, but sometimes, it's better to be guided and kind of go against, there's layers to our health, and those
Yes.
layers to those emotions get layered. So sometimes it's like peeling the onion. So to peel
Mm,
the onion first, so that's why you said, one of the first ones you like to use is the liberator and the closure. Let's deal with the
mm.
junk from
Yeah, yeah,
back then, right? Before we can deal with the present symptom, maybe we need to unwind the filters and the stuff that's created some of this. So I think that's really great. Is that, how you would recommend somebody might start?
I think so. I mean, there's certain remedies like creation, which I mean, it doesn't mean that as you're going through this liberation or closure stuff, like just sealing or for finishing with the past and the mess of emotions, that you can't put yourself in an automatically very positive space. There's Immortal Tara, which is she's the mother of all the Buddhas, and it's just being held through this process. Like, I mean, as a doctor, you hold people a lot through processes, and sometimes it's nice to just be held. So it's just that feeling of like, okay, someone's got me through this process. I can just go limp. I can just relax, and I can just go through it. And like, I don't have to hold up this strong front all the time while I sort of unwind my whole story. So we can do stuff simultaneously. We don't have to do just the weeding and then the seeding and the feeding. We can do them simultaneously. And this is where consulting with Diana is really good, because she'll look at the person's individual, story, and like where they are in their life at the moment and what they can deal with. We also have to look at people's capacity, like how much unwinding are you capable of dealing with if you've got a busy practice or childcare, or like you can't afford to like have everything sort of unwind. But saying that, I have created all of these things with these things in mind. That we don't necessarily have a week off in a retreat to like cry into the water and whatever. That we must do this while we're continuing with our lives. So I've built in a lot of like really positive frequencies into these remedies, so that they are supported, they are held, so that it's not too much. And if we find that we're going too fast, we can always slow it down or add in one of these supportive companion remedies to aid us in our journey. I like to look at this as is really we're journeying back through our story, and we're reclaiming a lot of the gems of what we could have or should have gotten from the time, and then we're taking the gems back, we're throwing the skeletons overboard, and then we're moving on. And each time we do that, we get lighter and lighter, and more and more aware. I think the more aware we are of, where we are in relationship to everything, the easier it is for us to navigate the world, and the less we struggle. That really is my wish for people, is that they can have a fantastic human existence. That really was part of my thing, and part of it, I designed it for myself as well. Like, I wanted these things so that I would be able to go back through this stuff and not have to struggle too much while I went through it. My ideas, the traditional idea of processing is like we cry on our pillow at 3 in the morning, and like misery and horror. But what if we were going through the same level of processing, but our best friend was with us and we were skipping down the street laughing, and the emotions were coming up and we're feeling them and we're laughing about them and letting them go, and the end result would be the same. In fact, would be a lot further along, because we'd almost look at the whole journey with excitement. It's like, oh, what's the next chapter? What's going to happen next? As opposed to like, oh, there's all this heavy stuff I have to do and deal with. And that's for me is like the wrong way to approach this. That this is our special journey, and if we can find a clever and fun way out of it, then more power to us. That's how I've designed a lot of these guys.
And one of the things you said also I think is important, after about age 7 or 8, when our brain chemistry actually changes and our waves change, we kind of lose that intuition, right? Up until that time, we're sponges, we're taking it all in, and we're more in touch with our body, the energy of the universe, and then from like 7, 8 on, we start losing that touch. And as adults, a lot of us really get out of touch with our body. Oftentimes I'll say to a patient when they come in and they have some ailment and I can't find a physical reason for this pain in the tooth, I will ask the patient, well, what do you think is wrong? Right. And then sometimes they'll look at me like, well, what do you mean? You're the doctor. But I'm like, but you're your body, right? You're the only one who knows your body as intimately as possible. And oftentimes when they they'll think of it, they'll come up with the answer, right?
Mm,
So that's what I love about these type of frequency, right? It's putting that ownership back into
yeah,
our own body, our own intuition, because we have the power to heal from anything. I truly believe this, and so again, why I'm such a fan of the energy medicine, all these remedies, is just getting back to, like you said, kind of at the beginning, right? It's getting back to how we were made, what we were originally made for, right? Was love, right? To learn how to
mm,
love unconditionally. Like that's the state we're supposed to be in. So how do we, these are the great remedies that help unwind, get us back to that feeling of love and joy and compassion, right? And not that we don't ever feel those other emotions. Absolutely. That's part of the human experience. But
mm,
we experience them and then we move on, right? And so it's not that whole idea of toxic positivity. You've got to be positive all the time. No, we have those other emotions and we feel them and we move through them, but we don't live there.
yeah,
And I think that's what these remedies really help us to stop living there and getting back to how we were, meant to be. So,
yeah.
so I thank you for all your good work. This stuff is super exciting. And, the website is Immortal Wellness.net. It's an amazing website, has lots of great information. Like I said, you can book a free consultation there. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. We carry the miracle tooth in the office because that has now been added to gum treatment. And I think it actually is going to remove some of the other things that I think are unnecessary. So we don't need so many things when we have that right frequency. So as we wrapping up here, Adam, is there anything else you would love to leave with our audience?
Just that, I mean, the whole purpose of this Immortal Wellness range is that, this whole experience of being human can be a glorious, joyous thing. It doesn't have to be this, running from one disaster to the next and putting out fires all the time. It can be like an unraveling of awareness and a deeper understanding of why you even manifested that disease to bring you to this point. So there's a lot of consciousness and cognizance in these remedies as well, to give one the the space where like awareness can dawn upon one and you can understand. Like you said, you often ask the people like, what do you think is wrong with you? And often this is all people have to do, is just ask themselves, what do I think's wrong? Just actually ask the question. And then these remedies will actually help us sort of begin the dialogue with ourselves to find the answer. And yeah, just to have a bit more fun with it, just with being human. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I hope all of you enjoyed this episode. Please go check out the website speak to Diana if you want, and start getting back to, that human feeling of joy and love. Until next time, everyone, we'll see you later.
Huge thanks to you, our amazing listeners, for helping us climb into the top 5% of podcasts in the oral health space. With all the love and support, we've been getting many requests for one-on-one consultations. So we made it happen. Are you ready to take your oral health to the next level? Click the link in the show notes to book your personalized consultation, and let's kickstart your journey to a healthier, brighter smile starting today. We'll see you then.